welcome to the Marketing Masterclass case study presentation. Through the generous support from Canadian Heritage, Working Culture, working closely with marketing specialists and our wonderful partners, Kingston Arts Council and the Ottawa Arts Council, have developed a marketing incubator program for arts and heritage organizations in Toronto, Kingston, and Ottawa. This case study is one component of the intensive training and is presented today by Shannon Urie, Marketing Director of the National Arts Centre. The objective of these case studies is to learn from arts and heritage organizations that have implemented a marketing project that produced a favorable outcome, i.e. return on investment for the organization as a whole, for example, through sponsorship, promotional campaigns, digital platforms, or content. Each case study will include an overview of the organization, its marketing strategy, challenge, or opportunity that they face, the solution, and results. Working Culture and partners thank all organizations who agreed to participate as case studies. Thank you so much, Shannon, for being here today.
It's absolutely my pleasure, and thank you for the invitation. So as Mona mentioned, my name is Shannon Urie. I am the Marketing Director for the National Arts Centre. I'm in the National Capital Region on the unceded territory of the Algonquin-Anishinaabe Nation. So a little bit about myself. I've been working at the National Arts Centre for 10 years. Prior to that, my background has all been in sort of very traditional marketing, consumer packaged goods type of marketing. But it's been a real thrill and honor to be working in the arts for the past 10 years. I lead a team of marketing staff of about 15, and really our primary goal is to build audiences. So attract them, retain them, and encourage engagement in our wide range of offerings that we have at the National Arts Centre. So maybe I'll start with giving a little bit of an overview of the National Arts Centre if you're not familiar. So here are a few images from the old days and the new days. We were built in 1969, so we're 52 years old, and it was really intended to be a centennial project for the government. We are the only bilingual multidisciplinary performing arts center in North America, and we actually have 8 different performing arts forms that are served to the community, ranging from orchestra to dance to a wide range of theaters, including Indigenous theater. So it's a very busy place. We have over 1,300 performances annually, and we welcome over 1 million patrons throughout the year from everywhere from our performing arts, but also to a lot of community and public events, to our restaurant, to our parking, quite wide ranging. So the case study that I want to share with you today is about our journey to the brand, our journey to the new NAC brand, which was launched in 2014. So only because I think it's a really important story that can be reflected in the smallest of organizations to, of course, the significant big ones. So what is a brand? The brand is really, there's all kinds of definitions, but really the way that we reflect this is it's the narrative that portrays the heart and soul of your organization, your program, your offering. It's really intent. We talk a lot about the heart and soul, really, but there are several factors that go into a brand, which I'm going to showcase to you a little bit today. It's about clarity, it's about consistency, and also about the character that you're trying to convey to your stakeholders. So let me summarize the issues. What are the things that we were trying to address or that we identified as problems way back in 2012? There were lots. There were a lot of things going on. So number one is we had a fundamental perception gap. So those people that came to the NAC often loved us, gave us great, very high satisfaction ratings, high value for money ratings. But those that did not had a really strong perception about the NAC as being not for them, low value for money. There were all kinds of things. So we were inconsistent. Number two is there was very little national awareness of our national mandate. We actually had programming and initiatives that reached coast to coast to coast across the country, but people very much thought of us as the bricks and mortar institution in Ottawa. 3, I mentioned these 8 disciplines that we have, these 8 art forms. Well, you would never know that they were related. They all were sort of driven by their own unique artistic vision. And as such, there was really a little connection between them, certainly from a branding perspective. 4, we had very little NAC visibility. It kind of goes hand in hand with that last point. There wasn't really ever clear that this was all being brought to you by the National Arts Centre. And 5, on a sort of a more practical lens, our logo was dated, ineffective, had not been modernized in the 50 years prior. This is the old one that you see here on this slide. So what were our goals? We were really clear about what it is that we were trying to achieve. Number one, we needed to elevate the NAC brand. Number two, we wanted to build awareness nationally. And three, we wanted to shift and align really the perceptions of the NAC, what it is that we were trying to achieve. So with that in mind, we launched the project. And one thing I would say as a fundamental step, if you were undertaking any kind of branding work, is to really spend and invest the time in thinking through the strategy beforehand, before getting right to any kind of design. And that's really what we did. So if I use this as an example, actually, I'll point out the image here because it shows you the diversity of looks and feels that we had. There was really no through line. But anyway, back to the roadmap, the approach, we really saw it in three different phases. Number one was the research and strategy phase. In this phase, we really did a lot of consultations, not only with patrons themselves, of course, but also with staff, with artists, with other stakeholder groups, government officials, to really understand from them what their current perceptions were of the NAC and what their vision was for our future. So that all that work was happening in phase one. Topped off with very important strategy work where our senior management group were convened to really dissect that and more carefully articulate what it is they saw as the vision for the NAC in the future. Only once that heavy work was done did we go into the design and messaging phase, which was also very critical, but it happened a little bit faster. And then third, very carefully plotting out and planning the implementation and how we were going to roll out the brand. So I'm going to walk you through some of that today. So with all of that research and strategic planning, what we were able to distill it all down to, it's amazing, months of work distilled into just one sentence, but we were able to put together what we call the brand statement, sometimes it's called the brand positioning statement. But this really then, once this was done, became our guiding mantra to everything else that was going to roll. So you can see here that I've sort of highlighted a few points that were hotly debated, but ultimately aligned to, about things like creating a national stage, being home for Canada's most creative artists, being adventurous artistically, and being a catalyst for performance creation and learning in every part of the country. So a lot of things packed in this one sentence, but it also became really empowering to have an aligned vision of what we were chasing, what we were going after. So only once that was done did we get into the, before we go there, actually, one thing I should mention is actually, it's one thing to have a positioning statement, but it was also important to have an adjoining piece of work, which was, what is the brand character? What are the attributes that we want to convey when people think of the NAC? It was really fun to do this work. We really did a lot of what we call personification exercises, where we said, if you could describe the NAC as a person today, what would that look like? And then what, in terms of the future, what would that look like? So through a lot of those exercises, we were able to align on these 5 brand attributes. Why that's important to have these is that when it comes to designing, creative or messages or any kind of signage, anything like that, we always kind of go through the lens of, does this fulfill the brand attributes that we're trying to convey? Very helpful when working with agency partners. So with all that work done, the next phase was the design. And what we started with was really looking at our logo, our wordmark, and the addition of a tagline, which we never had before, to try to encapsulate everything that we were trying to communicate. So this is what we ended up with and was unveiled in 2014. So a couple of things I'll just point out. Number one is sort of the crisp and boldness of the design, which made it a lot more usable and allowed us to have a lot more impact when it was going to be treated graphically. 2, we have the icon, which we also, you saw what it was before. We wanted something that was much bolder, that was very open to interpretation. So you can see sometimes people say it looks like an N, sometimes it's an A, sometimes it's a stage with a curtain, sometimes it's a spotlight. It had a lot of versatility, which we really have come to appreciate. And the third element is the tagline, Canada is our stage, le Canada en scène. This really encapsulated in only 4 words all of that sentiment that I had shared with you a slide ago about our brand positioning statement. So with this now in mind, it really empowered us then to expand it to a look at the brand architecture, etc. So next I'm going to share with you how we brought this to life. What did that implementation look like? And there were lots of steps to it, but I'll just give you a few highlights. So first and foremost, a brand is conveyed, at least in an arts and cultural organization, through our programming, the product, the thing that we're actually offering. And so with that vision, it sort of unleashed our creative leaders to be bold in some of the work that they were doing, be more adventurous, invest more in creation, in original work, and expand our collaboration efforts with people from across the country. But let's turn our attention a little bit to the marketing side of it. So you recall one of our goals was to elevate the NAC brand and apply some consistency. Well, that's not easy when you have 8 different artistic leaders, but what we were charged our design agency to do was to come up with an architecture that both enabled creative freedom while still having some through line of consistency. And here are some examples of that. So all of a sudden now you can see that the NAC and its logo is prominently featured on every communication that we do. We're very strict with that, but yet there's still that creative freedom and however the artistic discipline wants to convey their art. We also very diligently chose to invest in a paid media campaign at the time. Now, this is back in the days, we weren't quite so digital, it was a little bit more print oriented, but I wanted to give you an example of how we were very deliberate in sort of, let's call it positioning the NAC at the announcement of the brand. So we featured artists, we had Royal Wood, Margaret Atwood, Blue Rodeo, telling their artist story. So remember, we wanted to be a home for Canada's artists, right? So it was a very artist-centered type of message. But then we also had some very practical things like our signage. So if you know downtown Ottawa, you can know that the NAC is very prominently situated in the city. And so on the day of the launch, we were prepared and converted all of our signage overnight. So again, it was a very coordinated effort. Here are some examples. This was before our big renovation in 2017, but you get a sense for it. As another accompanying point to the launch of the brand was something what we call the brand guidelines. Now, this might feel like a pretty administrative in terms of a deliverable, but I can't tell you how precious it has been to have what we call, it's like a roadmap on how to interpret the tone, voice, and visual aspects of our brand. It has become a Bible to us. It informs not only the very logistical, practical things about how to use the size, colors, spacing of our logo, but it also communicates things like what type of imagery, what type of voice is on brand, and equally important, off brand. Sometimes it's good to see those 2 sets of examples. So all of that has been captured in about a 50-page brand style guide to which we refer all the time. Another critical success factor for us for the launch is we invested in making sure we had as many materials ready for launch date as possible. And in this case, I'm going to show you some these are employee tools. And again, back in the day, a little bit more print, where, we had the letterhead, we had forms, we had signage, we had our badges, like every business cards, we had everything kind of ready to go to do an unveil. So it had impact in the market for consumers, but also for our staff as well. It was signaling a change. So let's talk a little bit about the impact. So it's nice to do branding work, but how do we know we're actually achieving the goals? We actually do research studies to measure the impact of our brand regularly. And I'll give you an example of a few of those measures. Number one is we do measure national awareness, not on an annual basis, usually about every 3 years, we do a dipstick measure on, are we moving the needle on national awareness? Our last rating, we were at 30%, which was a growth. So it goes to show you that there definitely is impact. Number two is we also assess people's interpretations or perceptions of us. So you remember those attribute ratings? We take a measure on whether or not people agree or not with those perceptions of the NAC. And third, another example is we do unaided tagline recall. So what if they think of the National Arts Centre, what are they thinking? We do, though, have challenges. Of course, when you're managing a brand, it's not all easy. It's not always challenging. A few things that come to mind is the notion of refreshing a brand. So when is the right time to refresh the look and feel of a brand is a critical question. And we also try to challenge ourselves to push ourselves on the interpretation of the brand. Two is flexibility. So on the one hand, consistency is very important, which is my third point here, is dynamic tension between consistency and creativity. So you want to be able to be very strong and mindful on what your brand is. That's the way you're going to, be the Nike and the Apples of the word, is by being very strong about that. But on the other hand, allowing some freedom and flexibility and creativity, importantly, in the interpretation. So we're always just trying to find that balance. So if I can just sort of summarize this with a few takeaways. Number one is defining the brand is exceptionally powerful and can be a very motivating and aligning process for your organization. It requires inspiration. It requires alignment. It requires focus. It requires consultation with your stakeholder groups, discipline to ensure that you're always interpreting it consistently, and creativity. It's important to monitor and adjust as you go along, and it's a commitment for the long term. This is not a short term, launch a new logo and done. It's got to be much more embedded in what you're trying to achieve as an organization. So there's my contact information. If you have any questions, please never hesitate to reach me. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mona.
Thank you so much, Shannon. That was wonderful. I also want to thank our funder, the Government of Canada, as well as our delivery partners, the Kingston Arts Council and the Ottawa Arts Council, for their support. So thanks again. And we hope that for those of you watching, that this was very helpful. And thanks for watching.
Thank you.